Welcome back to the Hellmouth, where we'll be digging deep on all things Buffy Season 1, Episode 3, The Witch. Now, this episode asks, what would you do if the monster was inside your own house? It proposes the idea that sometimes home is hell. In an attempt to recapture a part of her old life and identity in LA, Buffy decides to try out for the Sunnydale High School cheer team. But she soon realizes and discovers that some people will do anything for eternal glory and youth, even if it means sacrificing their own family. While episode 1 and 2 set up the character dynamics, the world building, and the big bad of the first season, episode 3 introduces this monster of the week format in this 12-episode first season. Now, the witch episode contrasts two different mothering styles, but it also highlights parental and societal expectations in terms of the male gaze, and demonstrates how staying stuck in your past can lead to your demise. The point of this episode is really an examination of how Buffy needs to hold on to a version of her former self and her former identity, which ends up tying into the original movie, where Buffy's highest commitment was being a cheerleader. This episode also highlights how sports can be cultish and how cheer can be an act of worship. While cheer can be seen as the epitome of the high school fantasy, the idolization of what should be is emphasized in Cordelia, the popular Mean Girl's ferocity to join. This episode is both commentary and critique of diet culture, body dysmorphia, image and perception over family, youth obsession, cheer as a form for the male gaze, dangerous jealousy, dysfunctional families in terms of mother and daughter relationships, and also the horrors of single parenting. It also highlights the lack of control in both mind and body, and also features one of my favorite tropes, which is body switching, or this can be seen as even body hijacking. In the beginning of the episode, despite Giles' protest, Buffy decides that she's going to try out for the cheer team. This is an attempt at some sort of normalcy, her way of reconnecting with her former identity, and is also a tie-in to the original film. Now, the intrigue builds when we're introduced to this dark den with these dolls hanging from the ceiling. There's this classic cauldron filled with some mysterious green goo, and it deliciously plays into those witch tropes. Soon after, we're introduced to Willow's friend Amy, who is desperate to join the cheer team. Willow also comments on her recent weight loss, which is due to her extensive training with her mother. The inciting incident is introduced when the most talented attendee, Amber, catches on fire mid-routine. Trying to figure out what happened, Willow volunteers to illegally hack into the school system, while Xander vows to ask around about her. They're ready and insisting on working as a team. Although Buffy initially protests, she ultimately, almost too casually, accepts their help, and thus cements a lifelong friendship. While Buffy and Amy are listed as alternates, ultimately not making the team, Cordelia does. And after a tense exchange between Cordelia and Amy, we see that Cordelia's pink hair wrap is on this doll. And this doll is dipped into the cauldron and a witch's spell is cast. It shows how two images can clash between ancient rituals and modern girlhood, where this Barbie doll can be interpreted as a sign of childhood innocence and also the imposed societal expectations on women's bodies. Following the cauldron moment, Cordelia ends up losing her sight right when she's doing her driver's ed class, where Buffy, sensing something is off with her, ends up saving her just in time, which is another moment where Buffy will save anyone despite how they feel about her. And Giles easily recognizes that loss of sight is a classic sign of witch warfare. In science class, there's a moment of foreshadowing where Xander is so hesitant to dissect his specimen, but Willow is able to grab the Eye of Newt and put it in the beaker with complete ease. And this beat hints at her own future development with witchcraft as she proceeds to conduct that test against Amy. Now, in order to conduct this witch test, Buffy has to steal some of Amy's hair, and moments later, another classmate becomes disfigured and literally loses her mouth. And this scene and this image can also be interpreted as a way where losing your voice can be a gateway to losing your power. And ultimately, the Scooby's test confirms that Amy is indeed a practicing witch. Buffy is then targeted next and starts to become really sick. So Giles, with sick Buffy in tow, decide to confront Amy's mom. It's there that Buffy realizes that there's these hidden brownies and deduces that Amy is actually in her mother's body, which means that Amy's mom is in Amy's body. She stole her youth so that she could go back to being on the cheer team, back to her glory days. After that science class experiment, fake Amy realized that Buffy stole some of her hair, which is why she steals this gifted bracelet that Xander gave to Buffy as a means of trying to ask her out, and uses that bracelet to cast the spell on her to make her sick. Buffy's sickness initially starts as her being loopy, but it inevitably gets her kicked off the cheer team, which means that Amy moves up. According to Giles, Buffy has been put under a Bloodstone Vengeance spell, which is essentially an attack on her immune system. At Amy's house, Giles is able to discover the witch's lair and also the book that they need to reverse their curses. While Amy's cheering at a basketball game, Giles starts performing a spell that will switch Amy back into her original body. And while Giles' spell is successful, Catherine, Amy's mom, immediately tries to cast a spell on Buffy. Now Buffy is able to quickly divert this. In a moment of quick thinking, Buffy is able to kick a mirror into place, and Catherine ends up casting the spell upon herself. And it's also symbolic because the weapon that she uses is a mirror. And Buffy is able to save herself, but with the help of others. The episode concludes with Amy living with her dad, and Catherine still missing. And in the final image of the episode, we see the shifting eyes behind the bronze cheer statue, where Catherine is trapped inside the trophy and forever on display, just like she wanted. And the subplot of this episode is Xander's developing crush on Buffy. He wants to ask her on a date and also gifts her a bracelet. He goes to Willow for advice, and Willow also has to swallow her unrequited love for Xander. And while Xander inadvertently rejects Willow, the ironic twist is that Buffy actually ends up calling Xander one of the girls, where Xander essentially gets a taste of his own medicine. And even in Buffy's loopy, cursed state, she still rejects Xander romantically. Stay tuned for part 2, where we dig deep on my takeaways and the final messages of Season 1, Episode 3, The Witch.